Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to my second channel geography video. This is our series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff, and today I want to talk about a particular part of the world that I particularly like, and that is the international borders between countries. I love the fact that one country ends and another country begins, and I also love the fact that we're really well aware of where all of them are and where all of them exist. Interesting, that means we know all of the longest borders in the world. We know the very longest border is the one between the US and Canada, but at one point recently I googled to try and work out what the shortest border between countries was, because I figured I'll Google it, or just say, oh yeah, the Belarus-Lithuania border, and I'd be all done with that. But no, the truth is when you try to Google the shortest border between countries, it really turns into an argument about what you mean by that, and do you mean all of the borders? And there's a bunch of different criteria for it, and borders we're not too sure of, which I found shocking. And I want to talk about in today's video the shortest borders in the world, in my opinion, because there's a bunch of different categories in terms of this and then that, and basically there's lots of different shortest borders, and I figured why not go through them in order of decreasing length in today's video. So yeah, we're gonna be going through a bunch of different awards for different short borders. Hopefully you do all enjoy the video. Let's get straight into talking though about the longest border, because I just wanted to mention the US-Canada border. I find it fascinating because again, they're two such friendly countries despite sharing such a tension on an edge there, and fascinatingly enough, even though there's this giant straight line on it, or seemingly straight line in their border, because it's a straight line on a Mercator projection map, and Mercator projection isn't accurate over giant continent-sized distances, it means that the actual fastest way to go from this point to this point, you might figure it's a straight line across the border, but no, the fastest way from it is because of the curvature of the Earth to go all the way around like that. Again, I found that fascinating, maybe you do too, and the reason for that is because when you put on a globe, that's actually straight and that's a curved line. So, fun fact you might not have known about the very longest border in the world, but that's not true on the shortest borders. Mercator is actually really accurate on short distances, or it's less inaccurate you can say on short distances, and that means that when we go to our first border here, which is what I like to call the shortest border in the world, the longest border in the world that people think, that's actually really short in terms of people don't even know it exists, because it's the border between Russia and China, part 2. You might think, oh yeah, the Russian-Chinese border, that's that thing there, but this is the second Russian-Chinese border that so many people don't know about, because I made a video on quad points, and I was like, there was almost one, and apparently there used to be one a while ago, but the interesting thing about quad points is everyone says, no, Toycat, there is a quad point. Look at Kazakhstan, look at Mongolia, look at China, and look at Russia. And I'm sure even at this angle, we can all look at this map and we can say, wait a minute, I see right there that this is not true. But no, a lot of people don't know this border exists. It's about 40 kilometers or so. I'll show you, I'll measure the distances for all these, by the way. As you can see, it's about 40 kilometers across, but yet people still don't know it exists. So 40 kilometers is the longest short border on this list, and it's one you might not have known existed. But as far as actual short borders between countries, if you count every bit of one country and every bit of another country, and you're not including micro countries, then the commonly touted one is the Russian-North Korea border. This is a very short border crossing between the 2 points, and as you can see, it's again, we're talking full countries, by the way. As you can see, it's only 13 kilometers, a little bit more when you count the bends in the river, but still, we're talking just under 20 kilometers between Russia and North Korea. In fact, most people don't even know that Russia borders North Korea. They're very invested in the situation there because of that tiny border. They do, they're one of the only 3 countries that North Korea borders, and it's kind of nuts that I mention this every time Russia comes up, because it blows my mind every time it comes up. Russia borders both North Korea and Norway. That is that is the extent of the country, and yeah, the border with Norway is one of the shortest in the world at just 20 kilometers, which by the way is all river border anyway. I mean, it's technically a border in some ways, and it's all marked and stuff, but realistically it means there's one railway bridge in and out of the country. It's not really that much like a physical border where there's things happening one side, and crossing it is not something you get to do very often. So as far as in other borders, you don't get to cross very often, but talking more about an exclave of a country, so whether you count this or not might not count. So this is the shortest border between 2 countries if you mean full countries, but you mean oh yeah, but exclaves count, and that is the one between Turkey and Azerbaijan. So you might look at this map and say, Turkey, Azerbaijan. Toycat, you're getting Armenia or Georgia and Azerbaijan confused. That's very offensive to the people in this region. But no, if you're not familiar, the situation in all of the former USSR republics, I mean, just look at this to kind of understand that right there. But the situation on the borders between USSR republics is always a messy situation, especially because of autonomous republics. There's lots of just nonsense going on, and or maybe nonsense is an offensive word. But my point being is this part right here that you might think is Armenia and just separated actually belongs to Azerbaijan. It's very confusing, but there's an exclave of Azerbaijan here, and there's a bunch of travel restrictions on this. This is a whole mess of a place by itself. I feel again, let's not refer to it as a mess, but it kind of is one. But this means that the border between Turkey and Azerbaijan actually is only existent at this point right here. As you can see, it's a very, very short border. You can't even really spot it on maps. It looks like it's separated when you go from here. In fact, it looks like a quad point, but no, there is almost a quad point separated by it's just over 10 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, or just under 10 kilometers. As you can see, from one point to the other, it's just just 9.86 across, and it's a lot more of the river, but still, a very short border between countries, one that you can't really spot on maps, and one you probably don't know about, because it's not very frequently crossed. There's literally one crossing point, it's a road, and like, how often is that really being used? Not very often at all, and yeah, that's my whole point here. Turkey and Azerbaijan share a border, and Turkey's huge, and Azerbaijan's over there, but they share one in this weird exclave over there, and this is just one of these weird situations. So, if you count micro-countries in your little estimation, but you don't want to count, like, you know, weird little tiny things, because, you know, we're not even going to go into the situation of, like, oh, but what about these? But if you count micro-countries, then the shortest border between two countries, you know, counting all of it at once, is actually to count the one between the Vatican City and Rome. So, the Vatican City is, in fact, a country. It's the only widely recognized country that isn't a UN member, as a fun little fact, actually. But yeah, the Vatican City is a tiny country. It's one so small that if you look at it from up here, you just don't see it. Like, San Marino and Vatican City, both of them, really don't feature on these maps, even though they're full-on countries of their own. But yeah, as you can see, Vatican City does exist right here, and even though, like, its whole, like, country definition is a little bit of a weird one, you can see that the, you know, Vatican City, it's only, like, 500 meters any part around. It's something like I think it's 1.9 or something. Like, it's a very short distance around the border. As you can see, we'll measure it all the way around like this, actually. As you can see, it's like an absurdly short border around the country, just like that. As you can see, it's just over 2 kilometers from what we're getting here, and yeah, because of that, it's the most ridiculously small border between two countries in the world if you count micro countries, and you want to count all of the border between two countries, and that's an interesting thing right there. So yeah, with that said, that's the smallest border between two countries, counting all of the country and also counting micro countries. But what if you want to go to the next level beyond that? Because honestly, by the way, we're not counting for any of this, the Belgium, Netherlands, Bali hot dog thing, but yeah, if we want to go to the very next level beyond that, then what you might be able to say is like, okay, well, given that Gibraltar is technically a part of the United Kingdom, because it is in the EU alongside the UK and they're British citizens, and you know it's technically UK in some way, then technically you can count that this part of the Great Britain and Spain, because it's the only border they share, as you can see right here, this is the only border between them, and it's only 1.3 kilometers across, something like that, 1.2 kilometers across, like 1.3 when you do that, but still, it's a very short border across, and this is the shortest border if you're counting overseas territories and possessions and stuff like that, and if you want to count all of the borders between two countries in this particular way, 1.3 kilometers, that's so absurdly short. And as a fun fact, but because their country is so short and because this international airport's there, you actually have to drive over the airport to get from one place to the other. So this is what the road looks like, by the way. Like, I don't know if I've shown this off yet, but I think it's nuts that, like, the only road in and out of Gibraltar has to go over there also, only international airport. And yeah, Gibraltar is a very strategically important place in Europe. In case you're curious as to why the British still own it, it's because it has historical reasons, because you kind of control all of this, which controls all of this, which controls all of the shipping base net. And even though it doesn't necessarily do that today, it is a very important part of the UK, and it's like a whole controversial thing because of like EU UK relationships. Just point being, Gibraltar is a thing that exists right here, and it's also one of the shortest borders if you count all of the borders between two countries, because as a fun fact, the UK and Spain do not share many borders besides this one right here. So if you're not going to just you know, have that restriction of like, oh yeah, it doesn't have to be all the borders between two countries, and we're going to count overseas possessions and islands and stuff, because we're going to have to ignore this Sweden-Finland border right here to instead go to this Sweden-Finland border. So it's a border that's so small and so weird that it's not marked on Google Maps, but I swear it does exist. It's a famous story actually, because it was an island that the Sweden and Finland agreed to split about 200 years ago now. So they split the island of Market about 200 years ago. This one right here, it's not too important, but the fun thing is that accidentally, I believe, the on the Finnish side of the island, they built themselves a lighthouse, but they built it on the Swedish side of the island. So what they actually did in a later treaty is, rather than splitting it right down the middle, which by the way would have ended up being our shortest border between two countries, counting this sort of thing, it's less than a kilometer wide. A kilometer between one country and another country. But still, the thing that made this you know, had to be changed is the fact that the Finnish accidentally built a lighthouse on the Swedish side, and because they both wanted to still own half the island, the way they decided to resolve it was with this. And I don't know, there's something just so cute and adorable about that, and that technically means it's slightly longer than the 1.2, but I had to mention it because at one point it was short, and also it's just a fun story whenever it comes up. But what is the actual shortest border between two countries? If you just go all of the definitions, you go all into it, as far as I can tell, the very, very shortest border between two countries, this is going to surprise you because it involves Spain again, and you might think there are not many countries Spain's borders, and you can't really argue that bit of France even. So what it actually is it's between Spain and Morocco. So Morocco, if you don't know, has a few Spanish exclaves attached to it. There's like one over here. The most notable one is the one nearest to Spain, Ceuta, I believe it is. I don't know if that's the official pronunciation. I'm not Spanish, but there is also a very tiny border. You don't spot on maps because it's that tiny. Even when we go to this level, like look how big Gibraltar is and how big that border is at this level, you still can barely spot the border I'm talking about on this level because you have to zoom in another few levels until you end up at this point right here. So I don't entirely know why this still belongs to the Spanish. Apparently it's actually like a hot point of contention between the Spanish and the Moroccans, but this border right here is the shortest international border between two countries, officially speaking. And to quickly measure this thing across, because we'll go from one side of the thing to the other. It's so ridiculously short. It is just 77 meters across that you like. I mean, wait, we're not doing that officially properly. Let's make sure this is official, following the line on Google Maps perfectly. As you can see, it's a dashed line because again, contention. 80.76 meters is the shortest point between two countries in the world. And again, 80 meters is such a short distance. Like, think of a 100-meter sprint. You would be running longer than the Spanish-Moroccan border here. You could run this border in like 6 seconds and be like, well, I now have a couple of seconds to do over here. And exactly why it's such a short border is just because of the complications of geography. A lot of the points the Spain still own is because of these little things. But still, shortest border in the world because of this random complication. And as a fun little fact that at least I thought was fun. It's not probably fun for the Spanish and Moroccans involved. But if you actually go to Google Maps, like how North Korea has those fake reviews, if you read reviews for this base, all it is just people being like either... Yusef over here says it's occupied territories, angry emoji, and then people being really proud about Spain. It's like, Spain lives, and, stuff like that. And my point being is, it's one of these, a point this small causes that much contention because there's a military base very close to Morocco, and I think it's interesting. I'd say funny, but like I'm sure to the people involved it's not. But it's so interesting that there are so many tiny border points like this in the world, and this one right here. Oh wait, see, it's so easy to dismiss it. Is one that causes a lot of contention, and also as a fun fact, I think them setting up a cafe right next to the border. I'm just saying, like, on the Spanish side, we got a military base. On the Moroccan side, we've got 2 restaurants nearby, a beach, and a cafe. I'm just saying, one of those sides is clearly, taking their side of the border a bit more seriously. But yeah, with that said, that is the shortest international border in the world. Again, according to some definitions, I've heard. So this is one of those things where you can't even prove it on any map because it's so small and it's like theoretical islands. But there's theoretically a 50-meter border between India and Sri Lanka. There's a bunch of like theoretical borders like that, and that's what I mean by like we don't properly know, but by most definitions and by the definition I care about, this is the one I'll be pointing to, and maybe it can be the one you pointed to. Or maybe you don't care about these videos, you just watch them so you can leave angry comment. Oh, I thought I wasn't recording now. I was like, no! I was just... but yeah, if you want to just leave angry comments, then that's your thing you can do. So before I go, I want to mention one more thing. A lot of people are always curious, like, where I'm going next, and I think I should mention it. So I'm still going to Czechia in a week and a half, but this week, this Thursday and Friday, I'm going to Kaunas and for like an hour, and then I'm going to stay in Vilnius for the night. So if you're curious, the next country I'm going to, Lithuania, I'm probably going to record a video on this channel from there, actually. So stay tuned for that. But for now... I've had enough fun talking words on the internet, and hopefully you have too. Well, actually, you haven't been talking, you've been listening. It's a sad way the internet works like that, isn't it? But yeah, thank you very much for watching today's video. I'll speak to you next from Lithuania, and I guess I'll see you all in another one. Bye!